Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show that talks about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I hope you'll join me as I chat to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation over in the Let's Talk Near Death online community, which is found at www.letstalkneardeath.com. Membership is free, or you're welcome to upgrade to join the live VIP events, to gain early access to episodes, or to receive extra VIP bonus material. Your support helps me to continue to get episodes out and to help grow the conversation around these types of experiences. But before then, let's talk near death.
And as I fell asleep that night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, wow, I'm going to be in a car accident and I'm going to be lucky if I survive. They found me out of the car, thrown from the car about 40 feet, face down, turning blue. Waking up and being in this room, this white, bright room, and there were 6 beings, 3 on either side, and they were very tall and they were very bright and very light.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. Today, I'm joined by Shawna Ristic, who had a near-death experience in 1993 when she was in a serious car accident. Shawna remembers being outside of her body, meeting beings filled with light, and gaining a greater understanding of how all of our lives are connected. Today, Shawna is a body worker and an intuitive healer. She's on a mission to bring consciousness into the world by creating a space to recognize that we are all integrated by mind, body, soul, and spirit. So Shawna Ristic, welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, I know your story starts a little bit earlier than the near-death experience in 1993, that you already had some intuitive abilities as a child and didn't necessarily want those to be something in your life. Are you happy to take us back to your childhood a little bit earlier before your near-death experience?
Sure.
Share with us how that happened and whether you think that that set the stage for your near-death experience later in life.
Yeah, sure. I do think it set the stage a bit. Early on when I was born, I actually came in through a near-death experience, although I, of course, don't really remember that. But I had a disease called Highland's membrane disease, where basically when I was born, there was a big flurry of doctors, and they whisked me away from my mother immediately. You know, she got to hold me for, I think, like 3 seconds, and then took me to a different hospital and told her I'd be lucky if I survived. And what I later came to understand was, you know, the meaning of that, and this was much later after my NDE, but the working with the counsel that I met during the NDE, that later let me understand that part of that was to keep the door open between this side and the other. That, when we're born, it's like a door shuts between the two sides, and we don't remember where we were before we were on Earth. And for me, it's like somehow that door stayed open. So how that manifested in my life was that I saw a lot of different beings when I was a kid, and I actually didn't realize other people didn't see them until I told my friends. And then they would notice it sometimes if I would tell them, but they didn't seem to notice it if I didn't point it out. It was very interesting. So for instance, one experience was that there was a moment where a friend and I were walking home from, well, she actually saw this. We were walking home from school or to her house, and I lived catty corner from a grade school that we went to. And the alley behind the school was very wide, and there was a brick wall on one side and a fence on the other. And there was a man standing in the middle of the alley with his hands on his hips and his feet spread apart with jeans on and some sweatshirt or something. And we both looked at him, and then we stopped and we looked at each other. And then in the split second that we looked at each other and looked back, he was gone. And we said, whoa, did you see that?
Yeah.
Well, let's not go through the alley. Let's go the other way. So we went the other way home. And then a few weeks later, I was sitting in my house, and I don't often sit with my back to doors, right? And but for some reason I was, and we lived in a very old, creaky house, built in the early 1900s. And I heard the floor creak, like someone walked into the kitchen behind me, and I turned and looked and saw the same high tops and jeans and sweatshirt that I'd seen in the man in the alley. And then it just disappeared. And I remember thinking, oh my God. And I kind of got up really fast and went into the living room and sat with my parents and just didn't say anything. And there were often things like that. There was one moment where there was always, I could hear the floor creaking, or drawers would open and shut, or I'd hear them opening and shutting, or I'd catch glimpses out of the side of my eye, the corner of my eye. And there was one instance where I was laying in bed, and the door to my bedroom was to my left, so that when it opened, the back of the door was, beside my bed. And I remember the door was open, and so it was here, so I couldn't see around it. And I remember feeling that there was something there. And I remember daring myself, do I have the courage to see it? I felt this connection with this thing. And I said, okay, I'll see it. And then I see these light fingers peek around the door, and this face peek around, just pure light being with these wonderful eyes that just sort of glowed. And it looked at me, and I remember thinking, oh my God. And I had already developed this technique at the moment where you plug your ears and you close your eyes and you say, I don't want to see this, I don't want to see this, I don't want to see this, I don't want to see this. And then it goes away. And so I did that, and it went away. But, that after my NDE made me think, what was all of that? And after a while, when I started realizing that not other people were having these experiences, and I kind of set my parents down on the couch to talk to them and say, what's going on? I think the house is haunted. I didn't know that it was mostly me that could see it. I thought it was more just the house was haunted. Who knows? And they told me, oh, it's just the overactive imagination of a child, and discredit it. So I remember at that moment I said to them, I said, you just wait, you'll see. And at that exact moment, the attic fan started going off by itself, and the doorbell started ringing by itself. No one at the door.
Oh, wow.
No one in the attic fan. And
what did your parents do?
They just were like, oh, there's a short in the doorbell, and the attic fan just wasn't off all the way.
Yeah.
And so for me as a child, that meant either I'm crazy, which is scary, or I'm not safe. It was one of the two. What is this? If the parents and, if the adults don't see it, and they, even when they do see it, don't believe it, what is this that I'm experiencing? And my friends would sometimes see it. There was one time I was in the shower, and my friend was in my closet, and the door slammed shut on her. And she was like, oh, ha, 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 that's so funny, Shawna. And she came out, and I'd been in the shower the whole time. There was nobody else in the house, So these things happened, and I got very afraid. So that's when I started shutting it down with my little technique, ears plugged and eyes closed. And really just working hard to do what the adults did. I don't see it. I don't see it. It's not there. And largely succeeded. And then there was one other component that convinced me to shut it down, was that, that was back in the 80s when there was all those like hacker flicks and those, scary movies, and Exorcist had come out, and it was based on this true story. Right. And so I saw that, and then my mind starts going, hey, her house looks like my house. And hey, maybe her house is like my house. If it's happening in her house, it could be in my house. And what if it's the same thing? I got very afraid. And that's where I had nightmares for like 2 years after that, and really worked hard to shut it down. And then after I graduated high school, at that point I was still really in tune with people, and still really in tune with feeling people. Vibrations from people. I just had really shut down on the visuals of the non-physical. And after graduating high school, I was modeling and trying to create my career in that path, and took a job as a bridal consultant in a mall just to make money, and moved to Kansas City to work on my career, and also went to college because you're supposed to, not because I really knew why, just because that's what I was doing. And then, I lied. I ended up losing my job, and because I was late all the time, and I was a young 19-year-old and 18-year-old, and ended up. So I lost my job, and then there was a girl in my class who said, "Oh, I know how you can make money. I work in a bar. You just got to come there." I'm like, "Okay." And here I was also modeling, so I was needing ways to be able to leave and go on go-sees and go on trips and whatever. So I go into this place, and it was a strip bar, and I had no idea that this even existed in Kansas, where I was at. But sure enough, and I thought, well, I can do this, and so I jumped in and did that for about a year, thinking there was also a part of me at the time that had this feeling that I needed to go into the darker layers of human, to understand that, here I was, this sort of, girl from little girl from Kansas, and I needed to understand the heavier parts of life to be able to somehow help people later.
Okay.
So I hadn't planned to go back this far, so I sort of feel like I'm a little, but so what happened was that here I was working in this bar. I had this other trip planned on Christmas Day. And this was with the owner, a friend of the bar owner, which somehow seemed like it was, I don't know, how safe is it with a bar owner's friend, a bar owner's friend. But and we were going to go to Minnesota to a Chiefs game, which I'd never been to a football game. And so I fell asleep because as I was falling asleep, I was thinking about this, and I was trying to imagine going to the Chiefs game. How do I want this to go down? What am I going to do? How do I want to be with this situation? And I realized I couldn't even see myself going. And I thought, why can't I see myself going to Minnesota? And then I started trying to imagine myself going to the airport, and I couldn't even see myself going to the airport. And I thought, wow, I hadn't realized that I do that. I think a lot of us do that. You think about you're going to go to the grocery store and you kind of picture yourself doing it, and then you go and do it. And I couldn't picture it. And as I fell asleep that night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, wow, I'm going to be in a car accident, and I'm going to be lucky if I survive.
Wow.
And then I thought, oh, self-fulfilling prophecy, you're going to create it. Don't think about that anymore. Go back to sleep. And so, I went back home, and flash forward. At this point, I was also living with my parents. I had moved out of living on my own and back home with them to try to get my life together and figure things out. And flash forward to Christmas Day, and I woke up, and we had our Christmas morning with the family, my parents, my brother, and I, and, food and gifts and all that. And then they left to go to my family out of town, and I went upstairs to take a nap. And then when I woke up from the nap, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm running late. And so I threw everything in the suitcase really quick, and I rushed out the door. And I remember getting on the highway and looking down and seeing I was going, I think, 75, and at the time, I think the speed limit was 60. And seatbelt laws weren't mandatory at the time, but I still had been feeling like I needed to wear mine for like a couple weeks before. So I put the seatbelt on, and this was back when cell phones were those big bag phones that you plugged into the cigarette lighter. And that was cool because I had one, not everybody did. And so the phone was in the passenger floorboard, and I was zooming down the highway, and I remember thinking, I need to pick up this phone and plug it in and call this guy and let him know I'm on my way. And as I picked it up, or I thought, well, I'm going over this bridge and I'm passing this car. Let me just do those things, and then I'll take the seatbelt off and I'll pick it up. And so I was past the bridge and just about past the car, and I took the seatbelt off, and I bent over to pick up the cell phone. And as I came up, I came close to hitting the car I was passing. So I swerved to miss, and my car, it nosedived into the median. Then I flipped end over end across the median, then across the 2 lanes of traffic of the other highway going the other direction. And then they found me out of the car, thrown from the car about 40 feet face down, turning blue.
Oh, wow. That's major.
Yeah. The car behind me was a nurse. And the next car in the other direction was also a nurse.
Isn't that amazing?
Total divine intervention there.
Yeah, totally. So do you remember the accident happening, or is that all sort of blanked out of your mind?
I've sat with it. It took a lot of courage to sit with that in meditation and sort of allow myself to go back there. And I, because oddly enough, right after I started coming out of the coma, I thought two things. I thought that I had almost wrecked and then I had stopped and had continued on. And when they told me I was in the hospital, I actually thought it was because I had been attacked and raped or something horrible. Like, it was really strange. But when I sat with it in meditation, all I remembered was that I nosedived and then my face hit the steering wheel. So I broke my chin off. I have metal plates in my face, and then bounced back, and the back of my head hit the car, and that's what knocked me out. And from that point, I remember it was just this image of going up and out of body and kind of watching this haze from above, and lots of colors and lights coming in. Apparently what happened physically was that the nurses found me and basically just tried to hold my airway open until the paramedics came. There's this beautiful story I always like to tell, because after the accident, I never met the nurses, but every year I would write them letters on Christmas and thank them. And I think it was 2003, maybe later. I have the newspaper article. The Kansas City Star newspaper found out about that, and they did an article about us and created a meeting where I actually met them for the first time.
Oh,
and
wow, lovely.
Yeah, she told me it was like Indy 500 just watching it, and said that there's this beautiful story of this big burly truck driver who stopped. That I had this day planner, and I used to call it my life. Have you seen my life? And the pages of it had scattered all over, and there were just passerbys that had stopped, and they were gathering the pages of my life to figure out who I was. And this burly truck driver came with this rag, and he just gently, this big burly guy just gently like wiped this nurse's face of my blood from holding that. And it's just so astounding that, we feel so unimportant here and so insignificant. And to think that many people stopped to save me, and that many people, were a part of this bringing me back. And it's incredible to think that that's even possible. And so they took me to the hospital, and then they life flighted me from the hospital was in my hometown, and there was a trauma doctor there that was only there 2 times a month at that point, and she happened to be there that day, or they would have taken the extra 30 minutes to go to the other hospital, and they said I probably wouldn't have made it. And she was able to intubate me through the nose instead of giving me a tracheotomy. And then they life flighted me to a research medical center in Kansas City, where I then was taken to ICU. I don't remember any of that. I spent I've later gone back and looked at the medical records. And so I think from what I've determined from them that I can't find the medical records from the time when I was in the first hospital, but from the second hospital, I was in a natural coma for a week, and then drug-induced coma for another 3 weeks or so after that.
Oh, wow, that's a really long time. Yeah. Wow. So what do you remember in that time?
So what I remember is waking up and being in this room, this white, bright room, and there were 6 beings, 3 on either side, and they were very tall, and they were very bright and very light, much like I've later reflected that being that peeked over the door. I mean, this bright white light beings, and maybe they were angels. I didn't see wings, but they had that feeling, and I could just call them light beings, and they slid their hands under me, and they lifted me up, and I sat up but out of my body, and then I sat up and I was standing in the room, and I remember just this feeling of love and peace and okayness, and like welcome home, like home what it's supposed to be, and that these were like family, but like real family, not family with all the baggage and drama, that we know here on earth. And everything was okay. And they showed me what I had come to do. And I wish I remembered all that to make life much easier. And they showed me what I had done up to that point. And I really felt how my actions had made other people feel. Like from both seeing it from my perspective and feeling it at the same time from theirs. And I was just really felt bad, especially how I treated some of my friends or one particular friend. And then they showed me sort of what would be possible from here on out. And I had the feeling like the choice was, do I want to stay or not? And I really wanted to stay with them. A few months before the accident, I had coffee after work one night with my best friend, and I had told him, I know I came here for a reason, but I'm ready to renege my contract. It's too tough here. People are hard on each other here. It's too tough, and I'm ready to go. And then I had this opportunity, and I'm like, and so they kind of showed me how it's all connected and how every one of us is like a light. And when one light goes out, it affects so many others. And how it's kind of like looking out of an airplane window at night and you see the city with all the lights. And how, imagine if there was a power surge and one light went out, but it creates a surge throughout all the city and even some of the lights far away. And that, each of us is that way. But, particularly in this case to me, that if I were to go, that's the impact it could have. And I remember looking down from the corner of my hospital room at my mom. It was like I was having this information on that side, and I also needed to figure it out how it fit into this side, or have confirmation or something. And so I remember looking down on my body and my mom holding my hand and leaning her head down on it, like in prayer, and just the feeling of the remorse and the grief in the room, and just thinking, what have I done? And I just couldn't do that to people. And they showed me how it would affect people from here on out, like especially my brother, and how he'd be with women if he'd ever even get married or be with a woman after this. And I don't, at first when I first came back, I didn't feel like it was my decision. But over time, I've come to realize that part of it was I also felt like I had, that I had an obligation to not only my family to come back. I couldn't do this to them, but I also had an obligation to these beings, to this council, that I was here in some way representing, or maybe they're my soul council or something, but that I had an obligation and commitment to them too. And the last thing I remember is sitting in a circle of those beings. There were actually 12 of them, and they were all debating whether I should go or stay. And what are we going to do here? And that's the memory I really brought back first, from the accident or when I woke up. And I didn't feel like I had a choice in that. I felt like they were debating it. Right. And then I started coming back. And coming back after something like that is not like the movies where you just wake up and say, what I miss? I'm back. It's more like, you're in and then you're back out. And I remember two times of coming back and kind of falling back. And one time was I wanted to come back, and I had this real understanding of the love that I felt on that side, and so I wanted to understand that. And I remember opening my eyes, and I was laying in the bed, and it was dim in the room. And I remember seeing my best friend there. And so only one person could come in 3 times a day to see me in ICU. And so basically my family and my best friend just camped out in the waiting room for weeks, just waiting for those moments. And at this time, my friend was in there, I guess. And I remember he was asleep. And I remember thinking, wake up, wanting to will him awake. And then he opened his eyes and he's like, oh, Shawna, you're here. And I mumbled something because, with my face all broken up, I couldn't really talk. And I think he understood that I wanted to know what happened. And he started telling me something, but I don't remember at all what he said. All I remember is that light that I saw in those beings and I saw on the other side was in him too. And it's in each person. You can see it. You can see it in people's eyes, I can see it in you, you can see it, that light that that's the truth of who we are. And I was just mesmerized by it. And then I felt the room, and I could feel that loving presence, that love energy that's really the vibration that holds everything, that it's here too. And I could feel it, and in that room, and just how it's like this pregnant potentiality. It's warm, it's loving, and it's nurturing. And it's like the foundation of what it all comes from, if our mind would only get out of the way. And I knew that over there is here. It's just it's just an illusion that we think it's not. And then I couldn't hold the awakeness anymore. And I just sort of took that in, and then I fell back into the darkness and into the unconsciousness again. And then another time that I remember coming out is they would strap me in a wheelchair and wheel me to physical therapy, which I remember once getting strapped in, and I hated it because I felt like my body was going to slide out because I was hardly in my body. And I remember thinking this was completely ridiculous. I kind of remember them putting me on the parallel bars and trying to get me to walk. I remember thinking, this is completely ridiculous. I can't even control this body. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. You're trying to make me walk. And then I was sort of out of it still after that. And then I remember opening my eyes as they're wheeling me down the hall, and I kind of was back in body. And I remember seeing this other person coming towards me.
Hi, Kirsty here. Just a quick note to let you know that sometimes I go live via the Kirsty Salisbury YouTube channel and the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page. These sessions are usually on a Sunday evening about 6 p.m. Eastern Time, depending on the guest's location, the availability, and what we have in the calendar. These sessions are free for everybody to join. To get them, all you need to do is jump in and subscribe on YouTube or Facebook, and that will let you know every time that I'm going live. Once again, thanks for your support, and I look forward to connecting with you in one of our upcoming live episodes.
This other person coming towards me in a wheelchair, and I remember thinking, wow, what the heck happened to that person? They are really messed up. And then as we got closer and closer, I realized it was a mirror, and it was me. And I was all drawn up, and I was all down and drooling, and just thought, wow.
What Shawna.
And then I just zapped back out. It's sort of in and out. And then the next things I really start to remember are transfer day. They were going to transfer me to a neurological hospital in Gardner, Kansas, Meadowbrook. It's this great neurological hospital that's in the middle of Kansas. And they were so kind. My parents really wanted me to go there because it was the least hospital-like. Their biggest fear was that I would be left in a bed all day. And this hospital was willing to write off whatever the insurance didn't cover so that I could come there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which was super thankful. And I remember the hospital ride, the ambulance ride there, vaguely. And then, from that point on, once they gave me my first bath, because they have these neat thing, they strap you into this chair and then they move you over and put you in this little steam can, and it's so great. I remember begging them, I know it's against hospital policy, but could I have 2 baths today?
Just one more, yes.
One in the morning and at night. And then, from that point, things started coming back fairly quickly. I still couldn't walk. I was able to start feeding myself pretty quickly once I remembered things, they started to come back. It was sometimes just hard to remember. And then, they told my parents it would be 4 to 6 months to rehab enough to get out of the hospital and go home. And that I probably would always be mentally handicapped, and that I would, my parents had started making plans for me to maybe live with an aunt who worked with developmentally challenged people. But I did it in 4 weeks, and I left walking.
Oh, I love this. I love this.
Yeah, it came back fast.
Do you know, it's so interesting because I hear this so many times with major illnesses, and there's almost like a speed up on the healing. Like there's this miraculous element to healing following an NDE, because the person is obviously meant to be here.
Mhm.
Well, that's my theory. They're meant to be here because if they didn't have to be here, then they probably wouldn't be.
Right.
And then this miraculous fast-tracked healing to get on with the purpose that you're meant to be doing here on earth. And I absolutely love it. So yeah, this warms my heart to hear it again, which I love. So you were able to walk out of that hospital?
Yeah, I had a cane, and I had some surgeries after, some facial surgeries and some an ankle surgery. But other than that, and that was in February, and then of '94, and then by that fall, I was back in school, and
wow,
only went back to school mostly because I wanted to prove doctors wrong, and I figured out that I had to do. That's what I needed to do, because really it was like, okay, I know here is there, or there is here. How do I find it? And I clearly messed up with something about how to do this life thing before, so I better do it right this time.
Interesting.
And so I kind of observed all the people around me, and I figured out that you need 3 basic things. You need a car, you need a job, and you need a partner. That's what it looked like, So I was like, okay. And so within, a year, I was living the end of the year, I was living on my own. I was driving again. I got back in school. My best friend became, my partner at that point, and things were great. And then I hit this wall of depression, and a lot of really like suicidal thoughts, just thoughts of driving my car off the highway because it's so hard here. I just, it was just more the disappointment of how people don't see it, that it's all about love. I mean, who thought that war is a good idea? When is that supposed to create love and peace, right? I mean, these things that we do to each other, it's just so ridiculous.
I bet you were asking, where is the purpose in this? Is this what I came back for?
Absolutely. I felt like you guys
ripped off
me or what? You guys just bring me here and decide how we changed our mind, you know? Because we thought it was going to be this whole project to bring NDE to the mainstream, and that Santa Cruz was going to be the vortex for it to happen, and it was going to be this catalyst. And then, we taught the class with Raymond, but then it became clear that they weren't going to be able to move to be here, and then the whole thing fell apart. But I've been here 6 years now, and we're still here. And my practice is built really great. I've, I spoke at several of the INS groups, the Near-Death Studies groups, International Association of Near-Death Studies groups in the Bay Area, and they were very warm and welcoming. They've been such a great group just to help me feel comfortable to find words to talk about something that I've held in and self-edited for so long. And began my practice here, and through a bunch of same serendipitous divine order sort of things, it's built up, and I've been working with people individually, and I'm still one-on-one in an office. What are we doing? But I'm speaking in groups, and now with, I guess we could say, grace, thanks to COVID, we're all spreading our wings and meeting each other, even further out now.
Exactly. I mean, we're miles apart from each other, nearly the opposite sides. So, gosh, there's so much in that. Thank you so much, Shawna. You remind me of yourself with your feistiness and wanting to just get on with it and know what we're doing and let's go, because that's exactly how I was when I woke up from my NDE. I knew everything was okay. Let's get on with the purpose piece. And yet still go, I'm not quite sure I know what that is.
Right.
Yeah, really interesting, isn't it?
But one thing I did learn from it all, and even like that experience with knowing that the massage school was right, and this is something I really learned in France, is that I would go out at night and I would just challenge myself, because in those old medieval streets, it's really easy to get lost, and I got lost many times, totally. And so I started this technique where I would look for the brightest path. And I realized I would go out purposely, just weave through the streets and get lost. And then I would just say, okay, now I'm going to find my way home. And I would follow whichever path looked the brightest. It wasn't necessarily the brightest lit, but it was which felt the most expansive and the brightest and the most draw to it. And I always found my way back home. And that has been the guiding principle for me in so long. The times I don't feel it, where I'm like, okay, what's wrong? So you still do this? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so neat. And
In fact, I teach a whole workshop on it now, a three workshop series on just helping other people to feel their own ability to check in with their own, what I call the core channel, and their own vibration to know where to go.
Yeah. It's so important. I live my life by that. So totally resonates with me. What about today? Are you all okay today? You've got your movement. You talked about how you were so badly injured. You had to learn how to walk, how your face was distorted. You got the plates in your shin. Are you okay today?
Yeah, I have no repercussions. I have my left ankle sometimes it's a little funky. I have to just be a little careful with it. I had a problem for a while. I was meditating and I was sitting in half lotus, and it was too much pressure on that ankle, and the bone would always pop out. And I did around on a cane so I had to change meditation posture, and but I haven't had anything like that for a while. Other than that, I would say the biggest challenge is emotional. And I don't know if that's a head injury thing, because there was that. I mean, or if it's a coming back to life thing, or what it is, but it's sometimes a challenge, because I feel things so deeply, and that's part of what helps me do what I do. But it's, to be able to feel where people are at, but it's also hard to remember to let that go because it's not mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
You probably have a problem.
Yeah, often. I'm resonating with so much that you're talking about, which I love. The question that's going through my mind as I'm placing together everything you've told me is, your childhood, you had these gifts and abilities. You shut them down because they were, well, quite frankly, terrifying, but also something which you didn't necessarily understand or want in your life. So you shut that down. You've had a near-death experience. You're now in a place where you have gifts and abilities. You can see lights within people. You know things. Your intuition is, back up and running, really. Do you think there's any link between shutting down the abilities as a child and the near-death experience was like that spring-loaded track to open them all back up?
Absolutely.
Do you think that's why it happened?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that accompanied with that shutting down of those intuitive abilities, because it was also an awareness. I had a deep awareness of God, when I was little, deep awareness, and I went to church, but then and the only one in my family who went to church, but then I soon realized that their version of God in this church didn't fit what I knew God to be. God was love to me. And I think that in shutting the abilities down, I really pushed myself into really embracing the 3D world. And just matter matters. And, it's all about, power and seduction and, that whole thing that we're sort of taught. And especially, maybe less today, but, back then, especially as a woman, you felt like that's kind of my options, right? I mean, there were other options clearly there, but, it just felt like for me that there was so much emphasis on how much you could seduce someone, or what you look like, or, how you, the prettiness or whatever. There was so much on physical beauty that was the emphasis for a woman, more than talent or intellectual ability, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And so I think that this shutting down pushed me further into that belief system, I would say, and into only seeing that view. And that this was a way to sort of blast me back open, because I'd shut down and because I was going really off the path,
Right. So like a little wake up call, do you think, getting you back on the right path?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that the fact that I feel like Santa Cruz was really coming here was really a key part of the journey that I'm to be on in this lifetime, and whatever it is I'm here to do. And what's really interesting is that it's NDE that brought us to Santa Cruz. We came to meet my husband's spiritual teacher. He's the one who liked Santa Cruz. He's the one who wanted to be here. I thought we were coming for him and for him being a professor and stuff, and then it ended up being NDE. And I often think, was this planned all along? Did we have this plan? Like, okay, when you're 19, you're going to get off the path, and then you're going to get flung back open, and then you're going to take that. I mean, it's just like, how could 20 years later that experience end up impacting my life still?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It
I love
almost
it.
seems planned.
That's it. And I often wonder how much is planned, even when we go off track. Is that
Right.
part of the plan? We were always supposed to go off track, because then we would connect and meet the people along that track that's not the right track.
Right.
Maybe
And
we
we would be
needed to
to
meet
gain
them.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this just nudges us back on. And I'm not saying that anybody who goes off track has an NDE.
Right. Right.
It's, there may be something more serious. We have these crisis moments that just get us back on track.
Right.
But I find the NDE element obviously very, very interesting. I think life is very spiritual. I think we're in a physical world, but we have to consider the spiritual elements. We have to consider everything else that's going on. And I really love that you talked about how you had this knowledge, and if only you could have remembered it when you came back. We come here and we forget things. Why? It would be so much easier to understand and come and just fulfill the purpose, fulfill the life we need, not go off the track. So many questions.
Then we wouldn't gain the wisdom and the learning either, right? Because
I
in
know.
every crisis moment takes us into the depths of our soul to come back out with a new light.
Yes. Sometimes I feel like we're really a bit thick, that we keep having to have the crisis moments time and time again. I don't know many people who haven't had crisis moments in their life. Right. Not many people at all. So
I don't think I know anyone.
Are we a bit thick, or are we a bit slow, or why? So many questions that come out of that. Right. So you talked about how you were with these 6 beings filled with light, and you said that it was like the guy who put his hands around the corner and peeked around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of human, but not human.
Yeah. So it was like, think about like a light that takes human shape. But sometimes I think that maybe they only took a human shape because that's what I could understand, but
possibly.
It did have that human form to it. Right. But and what sticks with me more than even just like the visual is more the way that it opened the heart and the expansion that I felt, and that love, what is that love vibration,
Amazing. And then you talked about how you've got the 12, which are like your, what's the word that you used? Your counsel, your teachers, your masters? Counsel. Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that, because you have connection with them still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of my connection has been about trying to understand what is this, and then sort of coaching me through it all. Early on, it was about that. And I've had a period of time where I was like, okay, I want to meet each one of you individually and get a name. And I'm not really great with names. And, sometimes the name is like, it's a sound vibration, Yeah. In fact, I work a lot with names now intuitively, because a name that someone carries is a sound vibration that they've identified with for a long time. So you can use that to tap into their frequency. And so, but they would give me names and I don't even remember them now. This was 7 or 8 years ago. And I stopped trying to keep track, and it just got kind of silly. It feels like they usually either speak to me as a group or as one. There is one, I call her Ariella. She's one that I've worked with first. And when I was in France, I worked a lot with her. And so there was, there was a period of in massage school that I met, someone had told me about a woman who did angel readings. And I'd never heard of anything like that, because I come from very engineer-minded family. And so, engineer and IT people. And so I was like, hey, what's that? And I thought, well, let me find out about that. And I went to her, and when I showed up for the session, she said, well, when I checked in with them about who you were, all they would tell me is an old friend returns. And they've been telling me a long time that an apprentice is coming. And so would you like to be my apprentice? I was like, oh, wow. Sure. Yeah. So, I went every week just to meet with her for a year or two and just learn to meditate, learn to connect in. And, and that's where I first met Ariella. And I don't even think I pronounce her name right, but it's the best I can do with my human mouth. And started working with her, and then continued on. And then after I worked with CJ, the woman who did angel readings for a couple of years, about that same time, I moved back to Lawrence to go to University of Kansas, and then continued on to France. And that's where I continued working with Ariella. And so often it's her voice that I hear. I know them more by where I feel them in my body, because there is a distinction, between when you have an active mind like myself and probably like yourself too. It's real easy to just start thinking and thinking and thinking and get yourself all wound up. And all that thinking, I've realized as I've sat with this and tried to explain it, teach it to people, happens in the forehead. It's in this frontal lobe. But when I connect with the council, when I hear them, it happens back here. It happens sort of behind the ears in the temporal lobe. And so I sort of feel a buzzing there when I know that they're connecting in. That's there. I'm sort of feeling that out now. And yeah, it's they used to sort of pop in spontaneously, or I would connect in at night and just journal before going to bed. Or spontaneously they would just kind of pop in. And then in coming to California, like I said, I never talked about that part. So in coming here, someone told me, "Oh yeah, you got to talk about that. People love that stuff here." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it took a long time to find words for it. And so in working more and more with it, I've come to be able to bring it forward more and to sort of call upon it more easily and to talk about it a little bit more. Yeah.
Do you think that's those 6 beings of light are 6 of the council?
Yeah, definitely. I work with all 12 of them, but they don't all usually speak at once.
Man, that's a lot, 12.
And some of them, have sort of a more etheric feel to them, and some of them have a more stable sort of physical feel to them. So much to be said about all that.
Do you think that we all have them?
I do think that we all have guides and that we all have helpers. I don't know if it's 12, but, it's interesting because if you read Journey of the Souls by Michael Newton, he was you probably know that one. He talks about a council, and he calls them a council that are sort of the guides that sort of determine what we're doing here. And I've often wondered about that. My council has been pretty adamant, though, about me not putting them up on a pedestal. I mean, not that I don't have respect, but that I should see myself as equal, which is interesting. And it has been really a hard thing to carry,
Yeah.
But that, you are one of us, Shawna, is more the attitude they've taken with me.
Gosh, that is really interesting, because we do look at everything with hierarchy, don't we? We think that, there's angels above us, a God, and there's all these different levels, and we seem to look at ourselves as the bottom level.
Right.
So really hard to think that we're all one and part of it. Like, I get that we as humans are all one, and that in this experience right now.
Right.
But yes, again, there's so much conversation and topic around even just that one concept right there. And that's what I love about these conversations, is they're so, so big.
All divine, right? That divine light exists in every one of us.
Yes, exactly. And we are all connected. So I'd love to ask you, Shawna, what is the one big thing from your near-death experience?
Ooh.
That's a big question.
The one big thing that I've taken from it, or that I've...
Well, yeah, like the one learning, the one big thing that's changed your life, the one big message that you have for others, whatever perspective you want to take on that.
Yeah.
What is your one thing?
We're much more than what we've been led to believe. And each of us is. And that it's really all about love. And that's what each of us is. It's just that we've been led to believe we're not. Whether it be this lifetime, multiple lifetimes, or whatever reasons that has led to us to believe that. And that there's so much more there and so much more powerful than we've actually been led to believe. And that when we tap into that love space and into that light that we are, and come from that space, nothing else matters.
I love that. It just makes it so much simpler than we make it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love it. Shawna Ristic, thank you so much. I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you've had a full recovery and that you've come bouncing back with this renewed sense of purpose and passion and the journey's not necessarily been all that easy. And I love that you tapped on the depression and the harder parts following your near-death experience.
Yeah.
But I so appreciate everything you've shared with us. And yes, glad you're okay and wish you the absolute best for the future. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was really great to connect with you. And thanks for the work you're doing in the world too.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget you can join the free online community over at www.letstalkneardeath.com, and I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon.